There is a certain image people often imagine when they hear the word alcoholic. Someone older, weathered, maybe jobless, maybe sitting beneath an overpass with a paper bag in hand. A caricature more than a reality. Yet alcoholism rarely fits neatly into the stereotypes people grow up believing. And that is exactly why this story matters. Because what happens when a person checks none of those boxes, yet still slides quietly into the same struggle? What happens when life on the surface looks polished, productive, even admirable? But inside everything is run by a compulsion no one else sees. That contradiction is where this journey begins. For years, the phrase high-functioning alcoholic has been debated in recovery spaces. Many insist an alcoholic is simply an alcoholic, no qualifiers needed. And while that might be true in the clinical sense, the phrase still helps reveal a misunderstood reality. Plenty of people believe alcoholism only belongs to dramatic extremes. They think it must come with flashing police lights or a stack of court dates. If someone maintains a career, keeps relationships afloat, pays bills, and doesn't wake up in jail, then surely they're fine, right? That illusion hides thousands of people every day. And this person was one of them. No arrests, no DUIs, no public disasters. Just a steady rhythm of outward success wrapped around a private spiral that no one had the vocabulary to name. The turning point didn't arrive in some dramatic collapse. It came through something deceptively simple. Attempting to quit. Not because of some great revelation, not even because they believed addiction existed in their life, but because alcohol had been tangling itself into far too much of their daily functioning. The party lifestyle, once exciting and carefree, began feeling stale, almost embarrassing. Life was moving forward, but personal growth was not. So the plan seemed obvious. Just stop drinking. Easy enough, right? The classic words of someone who hasn't yet realized how tangled the roots have grown. And for a moment, they did stop. And that is when the truth began to surface, like a bruise rising under the skin. Looking back, the threads had been woven into life since early adolescence. From the early teenage years into the early 30s, drinking was the background music to nearly everything. School? Sure, but drinking too. A job? Always maintained just fine, yet still drinking. Hobbies? Well, those weren't exactly hobbies unless alcohol was involved. Parties, concerts, celebrations, even casual weekends were simply opportunities to fuel an obsession disguised as a social choice. It wasn't the outward behavior that revealed the problem. It was the internal shift each time alcohol touched the system. Something flipped on, like a switch with only one setting. More. More alcohol, more intensity, more chasing that feeling. A simple night out could turn into a single-minded mission, even at events that should have been meaningful. Picture someone going to see their favorite band and spending the entire night plotting how to keep the drinks coming instead of listening to a single note. Years later, that memory stands out as a perfect example of how alcohol had quietly stolen experiences without raising any alarms at the time. Attempts to cut back only highlighted how deep the dependency went. Meditation retreats, therapy sessions, new exercise routines, medication, church visits, clean starts followed by familiar endings. Every attempt had the same rhythm. Stop, start, become hopeful, feel defeated, repeat. It was a dance repeated for decades, with the same exhausting chorus. Finally, at 33, the decision felt different. This time, sobriety actually happened, and it felt like the door to a brand new life had opened. The expectation was simple. Once alcohol was gone, everything would rise. New hobbies, new confidence, new energy, new joy. After all, wasn't alcohol the problem? Remove it, and life should blossom like a garden finally getting rain. But the reality became something no one warns you about. When the drinking stopped, life didn't rise. It dropped. Hard. Instead of becoming energized, they became drained. Instead of becoming social, they withdrew. Motivation evaporated. Anger lingered. Depression deepened. Anxiety sharpened like a blade. It felt baffling. Sobriety was supposed to fix things, not break them apart. But without alcohol, all the internal turbulence that had been numbed for years came roaring to the surface. That confusion eventually warped into hopelessness. After nearly a year without drinking, instead of thriving, they hit an emotional rock bottom that felt eerily close to despair. Not actively suicidal, but close enough to understand how people drift to that place. When everything you were told would help only makes things worse, what options remain? The old solution began whispering again. If life was this miserable without drinking, why not go back? What was the point of staying sober if the cost was this level of suffering? That thought repeated itself more often than anyone around them realized. But a small act changed everything. They told a few people how bad things had become. And even though they refused help at first, insisting they weren't an alcoholic, someone unexpected helped break the denial. A casual hiking companion, barely an acquaintance, listened to the entire mess of confusion and said gently, almost too casually, that everything sounded a lot like alcoholism. The immediate reaction? Offense, of course. How dare a near stranger use that word? Alcoholic? Those were the relatives who lost jobs, got arrested, wrecked cars, destroyed relationships. Not someone with a solid career, no legal trouble, and a reputation for reliability. The idea felt ridiculous. But when someone is desperate enough, even disbelief can soften into curiosity. The stranger suggested trying a recovery meeting, not because she personally needed it, but because she had seen people heal through it. And honestly, at that point, what was there to lose? The first meeting didn't spark any transformation. It felt foreign and uncomfortable. Sitting in the back, saying nothing, waiting for it to end. But it opened the door just slightly. Enough for one more meeting the next day. This time, in a smaller room, surrounded by fewer faces, something cracked open. A hand lifted almost involuntarily, and a flood of truth spilled out. The introduction was hesitant, clumsy, uncertain, but raw. And beneath all the rambling came the real request: help. Recovery communities have a unique way of responding to that word, and help arrived immediately. Phone numbers exchanged, invitations extended, a sense of belonging beginning to flicker, even though denial still lingered. That moment marked the first real step into a different life. Not a perfect life, not an instant transformation, but a life finally moving toward clarity instead of circling the same invisible drain. What unfolded after those first meetings was not a sudden revelation, but a gradual awakening. The more they showed up, the more the pieces of their own behavior began forming a picture they had avoided seeing for years. Each story shared by others echoed parts of their own experience. Each description of obsessive thinking, emotional turmoil, or the internal switch that flips after the first drink felt strangely familiar. It was as if everyone in the room had been reading chapters of the same book under different lighting. Relief began creeping in from the edges, almost quietly at first. For so long, alcohol had been the primary source of relief, flawed, destructive, and temporary, but relief nonetheless. Without it, the world felt loud and unbearable. But in these rooms of honesty and recovery, a different kind of relief appeared, one built not on escape, but on understanding. It was the relief of hearing someone describe a feeling you never had words for. The relief of realizing you're not broken. You've simply been operating without the right tools. That realization alone was powerful. But what truly shifted everything was the understanding that alcoholism was never just about the drinking. It was about thinking. Cycles of fear, shame, self-doubt, restlessness, and anxiety that had been running the show long before alcohol ever entered the picture. Alcohol had been the attempted solution, not the root cause. And once that idea settled in, it was strangely liberating. There was nothing inherently wrong with who they were as a person. They simply needed a different way to move through the world. The recovery process introduced more clarity than they expected. Meeting after meeting, conversation after conversation, the internal weight they had been carrying for decades started to loosen. Behaviors once brushed aside as personality quirks finally made sense. Emotional patterns that felt overwhelming were suddenly recognizable, manageable even. And as the fog began lifting, it became obvious that help had existed all along. They had just been too convinced they couldn't possibly need it. The program wasn't the only support that unfolded. Recovery opened the door to therapy, medication, and healthier coping strategies. It wasn't a single solution, but a network of them, each one reinforcing the others. It took time, real time, to unravel years of emotional habits and beliefs. But for the first time, the direction felt right. And slowly, something remarkable happened. Sobriety no longer felt like punishment. It no longer existed as a miserable alternative to drinking. It transformed into something far better. Freedom. Freedom from the daily mental tug-of-war. Freedom from the cycle of trying to control what could never be controlled. Freedom from pretending everything was fine while quietly falling apart. Acceptance took a while. It wasn't easy to embrace the idea of being an alcoholic when the image of one still clashed with the life they had lived. How could someone who never saw the inside of a jail cell, never got fired, never crashed a car, fit the label? But recovery has a way of reframing things. Eventually, the label didn't feel like an accusation. It became a guide, a way to understand the past and protect the future. They came to see that alcoholism exists on a spectrum. Some people hit devastating external bottoms, others hit emotional ones. Some lose everything before they seek help. Others lose themselves internally long before anything on the outside cracks. The circumstances differ, but the internal experience is strikingly similar. And the solution, across all levels of functioning, points in the same direction. Connection, support, honesty, and a willingness to live differently. With time, commitment, and an open mind, the transformation became undeniable. Today, years into recovery, their life looks nothing like the one they once believed they were stuck in. Sobriety didn't shrink their world. It expanded it. Relationships deepened. Opportunities grew. Hobbies that once seemed unreachable flourished. And perhaps the most meaningful shift of all, peace finally found space to grow. The years of sobriety accumulated not through perfection, but through daily choices. Some days were smooth, others weren't. But the tools were always there. And with every passing year, Gratitude replaced fear. Purpose replaced confusion. Confidence replaced denial. That is the quiet miracle of recovery. It builds a life worth protecting. Sharing this story, isn't about spotlighting struggle for sympathy. It's about offering a bridge to someone who may feel alone, misunderstood, or lost in the same quiet tug of war. Alcoholism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides behind degrees, paychecks, good reputations, or busy schedules. Sometimes it exists in people who are convinced they're the exception because their life hasn't collapsed. Yet the truth remains. If the internal world is suffering, if alcohol takes more than it gives, if attempts to quit reveal deeper pain instead of relief, help is not only available, it's waiting. Anyone who sees themselves in this story, even faintly, should know something important. There is no shame in realizing a change is needed. There is no weakness in asking for help. There's no requirement to wait for catastrophe before seeking support. Recovery is not reserved for those who have lost everything. It is for anyone who wants to stop losing themselves. The person in this story once believed recovery wasn't meant for them. Now, they carry 8 years of sobriety and 7 years of active involvement in a program that changed their entire existence. Their life didn't just improve. It transformed into something they never thought they could have. A life they feel present in, a life they navigate with clarity, a life they can finally call their own. And that is why this message continues. It serves as a reminder that alcoholism doesn't have one face, one age, one background, or one level of crisis. It can look polished. It can look professional. It can look successful. But it can also look hopeful, resilient, and capable of change. Anyone hearing this today who feels that familiar tug inside, that quiet uncertainty, that question of whether drinking has taken more space than it should, deserves to know they are not isolated in that feeling. They are not strange or broken or beyond help. They are simply standing at the threshold of a choice. The same choice that transformed one person's life into something extraordinary. If this message resonates, consider supporting the Lost Library by liking, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments. Someone else out there might need the courage found in your words. Until next time, stay steady, stay hopeful, and remember, even the heaviest chapters can lead to a better story.